Hey there, and welcome. We spend pretty much our entire lives talking, but have you ever just stopped and wondered what's really going on when we speak? We tend to think of everyday chat as, well, kind of messy and full of mistakes. But today, we're going to pull back the curtain and explore the absolute genius hidden inside spontaneous speech. So let's kick things off by looking at what that messiness actually looks like. Okay, so what you're seeing here is a real, actual snippet of a conversation written down. And wow, on the surface, it just looks like a total mess, right? It's jam-packed with pauses, self-corrections, fillers, you name it. It's so easy to look at this and just think, man, we are just bad at talking. And that really leads us to the big question, doesn't it? Is our day-to-day speech just a sloppy, broken version of writing? For centuries, this was pretty much the accepted idea, that writing was the gold standard and speech was its chaotic, not-so-great cousin. But is that really true? The answer is a huge, resounding no. Spoken language is not broken writing. Not even close. It is a completely different system with its own complex rules, its own brilliant organization, and it's perfectly designed for the unique job it has to do: communicate right here, right now, interactively. A really great way to get this is with a metaphor. Think of speech as a live performance. It's spontaneous, it's interactive, you're using your tone of voice, your hands, you're feeling your room. Writing, on the other hand, that's the polished studio album. It's planned out, it's edited, it's perfected. It relies on things like commas and periods to get the job done. This also changes something called lexical density, which, don't worry, we'll get to in just a minute. So if speech is a live performance, then what's in its toolkit? Let's take a look at the unique features that spoken language uses to work its magic in the moment. And you'll see, a lot of these are things we usually just write off as errors. See, these so-called mistakes are actually really sophisticated tools. Those incomplete sentences, that's just us adjusting our thoughts on the fly. That kind of weird topic comment structure, like, the cats, did you let them out? That's a super efficient way to tell the listener what's important right from the get-go. Repeating ourselves, that buys our brain a few extra milliseconds to plan what to say next. And those fillers, they're not just verbal tics. They are crucial signals that keep the whole conversation flowing. Okay, remember I mentioned lexical density? Here's all it is. It's basically the ratio of the heavy lifting words, nouns and verbs that carry all the information, to the grammatical glue words like the, a, and is. And this turns out to be one of the most fundamental differences between speaking and writing. This right here illustrates it perfectly. That first sentence is dense. It is packed with information. That's high lexical density, totally normal for academic writing. A reader can always go back and reread it, but you can't rewind a conversation. So what does speech do? Look at the third sentence. It spreads the exact same information out over more words. It lowers the density, and that gives the listener's brain the crucial processing time it needs to keep up. It's not simpler, it's smarter. All right, so now let's zoom out a little bit and see the bigger picture. Because beyond these specific features, every single conversation we have is running on a powerful, invisible operating system. It's a set of rules that all of us follow without even realizing it. Linguists basically break these rules into two main types. First, you've got system constraints. Think of these as the technical, universal rules that make communication even possible in the first place, the basic how-to of talking. Then, you've got ritual constraints. These are the social rules, the politeness conventions that make our interactions smooth. And these can change dramatically from culture to culture. Here is a perfect example of a system constraint that you use every single day: back-channel signals. You know when your friend is telling a story and you're nodding along and saying, uh-huh, or yeah, you're not trying to interrupt them. You're sending a vital little signal that says, I'm with you, the channel's open, keep going. It's literally the oil that keeps the conversational engine run. Now, maybe the most important rule of them all was laid out by the philosopher Paul Grice. He called it the cooperative principle. And it's really the fundamental, unspoken assumption we all make in a conversation, that everybody here is trying their best to work together to communicate successfully. This big principle then breaks down into 4 guiding ideas, or maxims. We intuitively try to be truthful, give just the right amount of information, stay on topic, and be clear. When a conversation is going really, really well, it's usually because everyone, whether they know it or not, is following these guidelines. But what's absolutely fascinating is what happens when we break these rules on purpose. If you walk outside on a beautiful sunny morning and say, "Oh, great, another rainy day," you are deliberately breaking the maxim of quality. You're not being truthful. But the person you're with doesn't think you're a liar. They know you're breaking the rule to create an effect. Sarcasm. This just goes to show that the rules are so powerful that even breaking them creates meaning. So while a lot of these rules seem universal, the way we express them has a very strong cultural accent. And this is where we get into those ritual constraints, the social rules that decide what's polite, what's appropriate, and what's just plain weird. I mean, just take something as basic as taking turns. In some cultures, a 1-second pause is a giant, awkward silence that means it's your turn to speak. In others, long silences are perfectly comfortable. They're part of the conversation. And what one culture sees as an enthusiastic, engaged interruption, another sees as a completely rude and aggressive move. The basic need to take turns is universal, but the how is all about culture. Remember those back channels? Well, how we use them varies wildly too. For instance, listeners in Japan tend to provide way more back channel signals, like hi, than English speakers typically do. And a simple head nod. Does that mean I agree with you or just I hear you? It totally depends on where you are in the world. You can just imagine the potential for misunderstanding. Even Grice's so-called universal maxims get run through a cultural filter. The maxim of quantity, how much you should say, is a fantastic example. In some cultures, a long, detailed explanation shows respect. In others, being brief shows intelligence. And what's considered a clear and polite manner can range from blunt directness to subtle indirectness. The rules are always there, but the playbook changes depending on where you're standing. Okay, so this is all some pretty fascinating linguistic theory, but why does it actually matter to you? How does knowing about all these hidden rules impact our actual everyday lives? Well, the impact is huge. For anyone learning a new language, it is not enough to just know the grammar. You have to learn these unspoken rules to really be fluent. In our connected world, understanding these cultural differences is absolutely vital for everything from billion-dollar business deals to just making friends. And this is the next frontier for tech too. Teaching AIs like Siri and Alexa how to understand and use these incredibly complex human rules is the key to making them feel truly conversational. So let's circle all the way back to where we started. That messy piece of speech wasn't a failure. Not at all. It was a complete success. Spoken language isn't broken, it isn't formless. It's a masterful, improvised performance, happening in real time, guided by a sophisticated and mostly invisible rulebook that all of us have somehow managed to master. So here's my challenge to you. The next time you're just chatting with someone, try to see the matrix. Try to listen for the back channel signals, notice the little dance of turn-taking, and see that cooperative principle in action. What unspoken rule will you notice in your next conversation? Thanks for watching.